Wow. Hello, everybody. Let's just get this all the way back to its first page there. A question for you. Why do people get sick? Interesting question. It's a very important question, because when you go to see your medical doctor, can they tell you? Can they tell you what caused your disease? Can they tell you why you have something like an eczema, irritable bowel syndrome, a backache, something like a thyroid problem? They might be able to tell you, well, it's a virus, it's a bacteria, it's something else. It may be stress. But actually the truth is, they don't know. Were you aware of that? How many people were aware that the medical profession do not know what causes disease? Well, you are enlightened, totally enlightened. Do you know why? Because the mass of the population do not know why disease or what causes disease, or the fact that their doctors do not know what causes disease. One of the questions that was not addressed, I believe, last night in the fantastic movie, I really enjoyed it, and it was a question as I was sitting down here, just behind Ariel. You're in the same seat, or almost. And it was a question that was raised by the co-author of my book, Rob. Stand up, Rob. Just turn around so people can see Rob. Okay. Which was a question, he said, why do people get sick? What causes sickness to occur? And just so you can get a real firm grasp on all of this and really get a feel for it, I'm going to share with you some stories and show you, I believe, why people get sick. And it is not as simple or straightforward as it seems. But it is magical. The body is truly amazing. There was one question, I think, that also wasn't, another question that wasn't raised either in the movie. Apart from, I think Ariel mentioned it, which was the purpose behind disease. And I hope to answer that question for you as well in this talk here as well. So, the first question, why am I sick? Let's just go back to the computer a moment, because it's doing something funny here. And there's a funny noise. Does anybody know what that is? A computer noise? Digital noise? I think we can just mute that, can't we, for the moment? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We found out what that was. So what I'm going to talk about is... Sorry? Okay. Being asked to get my voice a little clearer. I think that we just turned off something that was going on in the background, which will help. Is that better?
Yeah, it's for others.
It's for others. So you can all hear me, can you, in the back? Yeah, they're all putting their thumbs up, which is great. Perfect. So, let me just introduce myself so you get a bit of an understanding of who I am. I'm head of international training for metamedicine. And I train metamedicine already. We're just about to go over to Prague. Wonderful. I've trained in Norway, obviously the UK, Spain, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, USA, Egypt as well, with Dr. Khalid Al-Damawahi. I pronounced it correctly, haven't I? And I've just written a new book as well called Why Am I Sick? And it's available at the conference. And we will be signing this a bit later on. And I'm also in the extended version of the Living Matrix, as Joan just mentioned. So that's me. But I'm here to talk about metamedicine. And the first thing is, what is metamedicine? Well, the first thing I need to say to you is it's not a therapy. Absolutely categorically, it is not a therapeutic intervention. But what is it then? It basically precedes, I don't know what's going on with this microphone here. It precedes all therapy. Well, Lynn was having the same trouble, wasn't she? Yeah. It precedes all therapy, including traditional medicine, complementary medicine, alternative medicine, and energetic medicine. It is a diagnostic system that uses traditional medical systems within a reason to ascertain the original shock that causes a disease to occur. We believe that disease is caused by stress. A stressful event, a unique stressful event, has to be a particular type of event in order for it to occur. And we also believe that disease is not a mistake. It was another question, I think, that was raised in the movie. And a lot of people, I'm sure you may think differently. Many alternative and complementary and certainly traditional medicine believe that disease is a mistake. How many people believe that? Not one hand? Oh, a couple of hands. Then, if it isn't a mistake, why do we still talk about eradicating, trying to get rid of the disease? Why do we still talk in that way about disease? Because disease is really something far more elegant than we have been led to believe. And what I hope today is to show you a little bit of that, and what the body is doing. I want to share with you a story that happened to me. Some of you may have already heard this if you were in Spain at the NES conference. But if you weren't, then I want to tell you a story about my own situation and why on the front cover of the book there's me sitting there with my hands like this, looking down, and the title of the book saying, "Why Am I Sick?" I was in a training. It's a very unique training. It was in Brighton with a good friend of mine called Terry. And as I was there, I was on a roll. You know what being on a roll is like, do you? As far as when you're speaking and the words that are coming out of your mouth are magical. And every single thing that you say is amazing. And the audience are sitting there just nodding their heads and going, I love what you're saying. And you're loving the fact that they love what you're saying. And I was on a roll and I was really giving my all. And it was a unique training because I, at the time, lived in Bristol. And I was thinking of coming down to Brighton to join my friend Terry to deliver trainings. NLP trainings. I'm a trainer of NLP. I have been for almost 16 years now. And as I was delivering this work and my future wife was in the audience sitting there, I'd known her for many months before. I didn't meet her at the training. But my future wife was in the audience, and it was a very exciting time. Really exciting. We were setting up a brand new company, and there's all this things that are happening, and it's incredibly, it's dramatic, you know, it's really exciting. And then as I was talking, Terry, in my ear, leaned over with a smile on his face, and he went, "Fucking hurry up." I sat there and my whole world went from the outside to the inside, like this. I completely lost all contact with who I was. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there and froze. I couldn't believe someone could say something like that to me. at that time. It was strange because many things changed. I was quite knowledgeable about this style of training, and I knew exactly how this type of training ran. And I was the lead trainer, unconscious lead trainer. And what I said went. But my whole personality changed that moment. Suddenly, the transference of the power went over to my friend Terry. He started leading the training. Now, normally a training finishes at about 7:30, this type of training. We went on till about 11 o'clock that night. People were falling off their chairs through total exhaustion. I wouldn't normally allow that to happen. But whatever Terry said, I went, yeah, you do it, yeah. Not only did I stop being the lead trainer, I wouldn't confront him about anything. Inside my head, I was obsessing about what he had said to me. And I changed my personality towards him. We were good friends, but after that point, I didn't want to know anything about him. In fact, I was scared of him completely. And whatever he said, as I said, went. He suddenly was flying from the seat of his pants, running a training, and I was going, yeah, you do whatever. What do we do next, Richard? I don't know. Just, do you think we should do this? Yeah, let's do that. Totally against my personality. That night, I didn't sleep. And I spoke to my wife, Kristen, and said about this problem. And she gave me, as women are great at doing, she told me how to solve the problem. You know, women are great at that. And men, they just sit there and go, and nod at the appropriate moment and don't listen to a word. Well, I did that. I didn't sleep. And then for the rest of the training, I really didn't sleep at all. I was stressed. We recorded that training. And then for about 6 months after that, I was editing that training. I would wake up in the middle of the night, unable to sleep because I was obsessing about this whole thing. My interaction with Terry was he would say, oh, can I have this particular bit of your well-researched, many hours of work that you put into it? Can I have it for free? And I go, yeah, you can have it all. In fact, have the whole company. Whoosh. Everything. I gave him everything. Bizarre. Then something happened. My wife noticed this and she said, we should set up our own business. And instead of going down to Brighton, why don't we work together? And we did. And I managed to get some work. And I was up in a place near Wales called Mould. It does exist. And as I was there, I was delivering a training. And I was on a roll. And every word that was coming out of my mouth was magical. And I was just enjoying every bit of it. And the audience were feeding it back to me, nodding their heads. And I kept going, and they were excited as well. And I just thought, this is amazing. I looked over, because my wife was co-presenting with... My wife was... My wife was co-presenting with me. And as she sat there, she looked at me and went, and she didn't lean over. And in my head I went, I like this. I like this. And then suddenly all the power that had been lost before came back into my body. And I stood up and I got a flip chart piece of paper. Forgive me for putting my back to you. And I went like this. That's all I did. And this happened in my back. Ooh, let's go on to... A disc popped in my lower back, just here. You want to see a bit more? it pushed right up against my nerves here. This is what a normal disc looks like. You see the nerves? That's normal. This is the disc pushing right up against the nerve here. I suddenly went red with excruciating pain. I hobbled the few feet back to my chair, sat down and went, "My back has just gone," to my wife. And she said, "It's okay, we know hypnosis, we'll just relieve the pain." Which we did. But it didn't help. It helped to a degree. This problem went on for 1.5 years. I spent over £8,000 of my own tax-paid money trying to find a solution, with the emphasis on the word trying, which I think some of you may understand what that means. I went to spiritual healers. I went to the top osteopaths in the country. I went to the top chiropractors, the top acupuncturists, professors of acupuncture, not just your normal ones. I tried every damn thing I could. I went to my NLP friends and said, "Help me find a solution to this." I searched and I searched and I searched. I already knew the principles behind metamedicine as well, but I didn't quite understand them. It wasn't until I sat down in Germany at the first certification in metamedicine. By that time I'd had a brain CT scan done. Because in metamedicine we believe that as you go through a shock, it shows up in the brain and in the body simultaneously. So I had a brain CT scan, and Dr. Bader, who is the head of, or the vice principal of metamedicine, who reads brain CT scans, and he's also taught me as well, read my brain CT scan, and he looked at it and he said, "Ah, yes, this is very interesting. You have a self-devaluation, a self-worth conflict, and it's really central and very core to who you are." And I went, "Yes. And I think that someone has shocked you and brought you to your knees." "Yes." "And you have been over this many times." "Yes." And with that information, one of the other founders of metamedicine, a lady called Christa Oerika, an absolute gorgeous lady, in German, used a technique with me which I'd come across, but never really used, and really didn't believe in it. And as I did this technique, she said, "Would you mind just tapping on your hand here, like this?" And she started me doing a process called EFT. Some of you have come across this, I'm sure. Now, I'm an NLP guy, and EFT is like, no! But I suddenly learned that actually there are many different types of therapeutic interventions that we can use that are brilliant. And one of them, I think, is EFT. And I did this, and I went from being completely white and ashen and stressed to totally red, warm, and feeling, euphoric and relaxed. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment. But more importantly, I got out of the chair and went, that's a bit different. The pain hadn't completely gone, but something had changed. So we believe, you see, in metamedicine that as you go through a shock, it shows up in the brain. It shows up in the brain in a specific layering, in a specific place that is based on embryology. So it's not an unknown science. Medical doctors learn embryology for about 3 to 4 days in their studies. Sometimes a little bit longer, but most of them are about 3 to 4 days. That's right, Khalid, isn't it? Yeah. And then after they've learned embryology, unless they go into work with premature babies, they dismiss it completely. That's it, it's thrown into the door and never come back to again. That's correct as well, isn't it, Khalid? He studied using the English system. Some other people may have other interesting facts about that. But essentially there are 4 layers to the brain that we talk about in metamedicine. And the particular layer that you're looking at is the internal grey matter. And inside here we actually have what we call a homunculus, or the little man inside the brain. There are many little men or women, depending on your gender, obviously. Inside there we have, there are rings that show up inside the brain. And I'm going to show you some of these. The one I've got of my brain, unfortunately, is really challenging to see. But it is there. And the actual points I've circled, so you could possibly just about make them out here. And to be honest, you'll probably look at that and go, what? Oh, I can't see any of those things. I will show you some other rings on some other brain CTs that I'm absolutely certain that you'll be able to see. But Dr. Bader said this was a central personality self-devaluation conflict where I didn't value myself. So this actually wasn't anything to do with Terry. This was my reaction at that particular time. Terry and I have since made up, by the way, just to let you know. So let's just look and explore a little bit more about what metamedicine is and why it's unique, why it's different. Because you may say, well, you know, I'm preaching to the converted here. We understand that stressful events cause disease, but there's a little bit more to metamedicine than just that. You see, conventional medicine have a wisdom that has been around for over 200 years. Were you aware that the traditional medicine actually was affiliated with barbers years ago, and that's where their governing body was, and then they broke away because of germ theory and other things like that, and it worked. It was great. But the problem, I think, is this, is that in conventional medicine, and including many alternative and complementary therapies, all disease, pains and illness, therefore the symptoms, are a problem, which is what I was talking about earlier at the very start. Because the body has made a mistake. It's done something naughty. Little body, there we go. Diagnosis takes the symptoms and labels them as a disease. Would you agree with that? All therapy is designed to eliminate, remove, suspend, or relieve these symptoms. Therefore, cure the problem. I love that word, cure. My mother left my father when I was about 6. When I was 12, my father walked into my bedroom and he sat on the end of the bed. Unusually, he never did that. Completely non-tactile person. But that didn't matter, I love him anyway. And he looked round at me with tears in his eyes. And he turned around to me and he said, I've got to tell you, Richard, last night your mum died. She'd been fighting breast cancer. She'd done everything that the doctors had told her. She'd had chemo, lots of it. Radiotherapy, lots of it. She had a mastectomy, which she actually showed me very unusually for a woman to be able to do that. But she knew she was dying. She did everything, and she didn't survive. I remember that day walking up the hill in the school that I went to in Bath, away from all my friends, tears rolling down my eyes. And I made a decision. I made a decision that is the reason why I'm here. And it was, I said to myself at 12, I was going to find a cure for why she died. I apologize for using the word cure, by the way, because I'm not allowed to say that. Do you know that? Only the medical profession actually are allowed to use the word cure. So forgive me, please. I just sorry. I didn't know at 12. I didn't know, you know. So I can't actually use the word cure. But I think there may be something in what did happen that day, because I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for that unusual experience. And what is metamedicine then? Well, metamedicine believes this, and this is a definition, that all disease, pains, and illness, therefore the symptoms, are part of a biological program. A biological program, that's it, caused by a shock which is unexpected, dramatic, and isolating, threatening, here's the big key word, we've been talking about this all week, well, last night, and also Lynn talked about it a lot, threatening the environment of the client and sometimes its family. Diagnosis is designed to find why the program is there, what caused the program to occur, where the client is within the program. All therapies are designed to assist the client through the biological program to wellness, therefore completing the biological program. I don't believe disease is a mistake, you see. I hope you won't after we finish this. You said that you didn't anyway. So, is disease a mistake? Question is, why is a disease there? Wasn't really answered in the film. But then again, it may just be too far ahead for the general public to really take that on board. What caused it to occur? Could disease have a purpose, a reason for being there? Could there be a spiritual reason? We believe that there is in metamedicine. Could disease be a part of our evolution, our development as a species on the planet? What do you think? Yes? No? Metamedicine believes that. We definitely do. And I've got a clever slide. Look at that. Metamedicine believes that. So where does this whole idea that a shock causes a disease come from? I did some research for my book, and in trawling the internet, I came across a lovely lady called Susan Sergerstrom. Because I wondered, why was it around 2000, 2004, you would go and see your doctor and your doctor would say, I'll sign you off as sick because of stress. I never came across that before, but it suddenly happened, didn't it? Do you remember that? Everybody was being signed off because of stress. Where did that research come from? So I researched into it, and it was Sergerstrom and Miller, most of the work. But what they don't say in their paper is which stressful event causes a specific disease. Metamedicine, I believe, can prove that. I believe so, and I hope to be able to show you that. And if we solve the negative situation, then we could solve disease, couldn't we? Is that true? It's a good way of thinking, yes or no? Solve the negative problem, and we could solve the disease. Or the pain, or the ailment, or even the dreaded cancer. Ouch. Interesting fact that they said. Almost every major illness that people acquire is linked to chronic stress. There's the research paper, and the other ones that concluded that as well. So, interesting stuff. And there's a picture of Suzanne Sergerstrom from the University of Kentucky. I did write to her, but she never got back to me. So hopefully she'll get back to me one day and we'll have a good chat. So what does really cause a disease? Why did these people who'd done a lot of research, why weren't they able to conclude what does cause a disease? Well, there was a doctor called Dr. Gerd Hammer that I do know that Lynn mentioned, and she talked about stress showing up in the brain at the start of her talk earlier, if you remember that. And metamedicine is based on a lot of Gerd Hammer's work. And we've taken it away from Gerd Hammer because Gerd Hammer is a genius, there's no doubt about it. And he's also a maverick as well. He's caused a lot of controversy, which I really don't want to talk about. And certainly in Germany, if you mention his name, 50% of the people will go, ha, hallelujah, he's brilliant. And the other 50% will go, what? like this. And I don't want to know it. And so we disassociated ourselves from him and also then started to develop metamedicine a little bit further from that. And what we have discovered is that there are some key important points, and certainly it does come from Hammer, that cause a disease to occur. Because how many of you are under stress? Me. I have a young 9-year-old son. I've flown from Toronto to Canada to be here. I've been putting a presentation together even at the back of the room just now. Do you think I'm under stress? Absolutely. Do you think I'm going to get a horrible disease from it? No way. And there's some particular criteria that determines whether a disease occurs or not. Because stress, we can all live with it. We do need to regenerate, but it doesn't cause a disease. What does cause a disease is something that is unexpected. If you are in a relationship and the relationship isn't going that well and you're thinking, no, I don't really like that person, and the other person comes up to you one day and says, we should end this relationship, I'm seeing someone else. And you go, yeah, I was expecting that. Not unexpected, but let's say you're in the most magical relationship and you love this person and she's wonderful or he's wonderful and you just, it's just brilliant and everything is perfect. And they walk in and they say, I'm having an affair with your best friend. That's unexpected. Then, drama. Something that's dramatic. If, say, for argument's sake, you go into a shop and you say something to the shopkeeper and the shopkeeper says, don't talk to me in that way! And you go, oh. It was unexpected, but it was just you going to buy some sweets. It's not that dramatic, is it? You come out of there a little bit shocked, but it's not that big. But let's say it's one of the most important things in your life, that you enter into, say, a big, important meeting and the chief executive of that company turns around to you and says, don't talk to me in that way! You're fired! That would be dramatic and maybe unexpected if you weren't expecting it. Another one is isolating. Isolating. If something just happens to you and you're totally isolated, you know what that feels like. Where my wife, interesting thing did happen to her. Her partner, she thought she was in a great relationship with, and then he told her he was having an affair. And she didn't tell anybody for 2 weeks. Later on, she showed up with an abnormal cervical smear. I hope she doesn't mind me telling you that. I'll phone her up a bit later on, just to let you know. But she didn't tell anybody that he'd left. That's isolating. This is why we have group therapy. It works. Because everybody goes, I just had this terrible problem. And then other people put their hands up, I had exactly the same. And another person says, and me too. And suddenly they all get to talk about it and they get to solve the problem. Women are great at that, by the way. Women on the whole are great at that. They talk to their friends, pick up the phone, and their friends give them lots of advice, and they listen and they act upon it. Whereas a bloke goes, hello, you going to the match on Saturday? Yeah, see you there, bye. That's it. Don't say a thing. Weird, isn't it? And then no strategy as well. No strategy for dealing with something. You don't know how to deal with it, which is what happened with me. I didn't know what to do with this guy, with Terry. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to work with him. I mean, normally, a man being told in that situation will pull the other guy out and smack him around the head. It's not in my nature to do that. It just didn't fit. Strategy, very important. What causes a unique, dramatic, isolating event? So we have an acronym called UDIN, but hopefully not too many international people are listening to this, but there's also one if you have come from my hometown, which is Bristol. Does anybody know Little Britain? Yeah? And Vicky Pollard? Well, you can remember this through, I done it! Does that make sense? I done. Oh, I know. But lost as a joke. So let's go on to examples of possible shocks. Here we are, I'm sleeping with your best friend. I'll never get out of here alive. This job isn't worth dying for. You betrayed my trust. Go away. These are examples of unexpected, dramatic, isolating shocks where there is no strategy for dealing with the problem. Just examples of them. And it's also interesting. Something else that I noticed as well is that this also answers another question, because as we go through a shock, it affects the brain in a specific location which is relevant to the specific shock. Because if it wasn't, why doesn't a disease affect every part of the body? Why does it show up in, say, the lungs, in the breast, in the stomach, in the muscle, a specific unique muscle? You don't suddenly get every muscle in your body completely and utterly gone. That would mean your heart would stop, your bowels would stop, your rectum would stop working. Doesn't quite happen that way, does it? A disease doesn't affect every muscle. It affects certain muscles. It affects certain parts of the body. And metamedicine can answer that. Why does it affect only one particular organ? The intestines. Why do we suddenly get a diarrhea? Why don't we suddenly get a cough? Or what about the leathery skin? Why do we suddenly get a spot or an acne on the face? I mean, suddenly, I'm sure women, I know talking to many women, they say, oh, I've got a spot. You know, I've got a spot here. And you can't see it, but you know, it's important. But a spot or acne, why does that occur? Muscles, why does suddenly an ache in a specific place occur? Or ovarian cysts? Or the upper skin, which is an eczema, why do they occur in one specific place? Or bronchi with the common cold? Or even something that Ariel was talking about was a brain cancer. Why? Why does it suddenly occur in that location, at that place, at that specific time? Why does that occur? You see, the reason why it occurs, we believe in metamedicine, is during a conflict shock, the shock affects the mind. It actually shows up in the brain, and I'll show you pictures as I said it earlier on. It shows up in the body simultaneously at the same time. It also affects our spirit as a human being, how we change socially, how our whole behavior changes towards other people, and environmentally. Sound a bit like the field? Yeah. I'll show you some other interesting stuff that's come from Peter Fraser. All in an effort to resolve the original shock. You see, when we go through a shock, the body is doing something in order to resolve the stressful event. That's what it's doing. We talked about epigenetics, didn't there? There's a lot of stuff about epigenetics. And what we have noticed in metamedicine is this, is that there is a pattern that is started in the past, and it plays through life. And it could be a passed down to us by parents' beliefs or other influences, including past influences from parental, or we have found grandparents seem to have a major effect. Then they get a shock. The change in the environment, that's what occurs. But it isn't walking through a nice, lovely place. It is a shock, and that unexpected, dramatic, isolating conflict shock where the person doesn't know what to do causes a part of their brain to separate off, which we can see under brain CT scans. And the energy information gets trapped and the disease starts. And then it can also play again and again and again, causing a chronic disease by repeating the tracks over and over and over again. The person repeats the problem by entering, as I say, back into the lion's den. You know, if you go and you see a lion and you go into a lion's den, you're likely to get your hand taken off or your head taken off or your leg taken off. You would know that, wouldn't you? But then if we go back in again, knowing that, we're entering back into the lion's den, repeating the same problem over and over and over again. How many people have been out with people, have had relationships where they've repeated the same relationship over and over again? Yeah, absolutely. How many people have done the same job that they hate over and over again and had the same boss? They leave one boss and then come back again, and the same boss is there, only in a different form. Isn't it amazing? We repeat these tracks over and over and over again. And what we have found is the morphic field is actually changed during these shocks. In fact, the morphic field is playing in the background before the shock even occurs. And the body and the brain is trying to tell you what is going on so that you do solve the problem. But what most of us do, because we're such amazing conscious beings, is that we ignore it. We ignore the unconscious messages that are coming from underneath. And we battle with those relationships, don't we? We go to those places in that workplace that we hate and repeat the same thing over and over and over and over again until eventually the body goes, no longer, and creates an unexpected, dramatic, isolating conflict shock where there's no strategy for dealing with it, creating a disease. Time and time and time again, we find this in the metamedicine, with all the metamedicine coaches. And what we found happens is that during a conflict shock, trapped information inside an energy ball of negative emotion is created. Remember Peter Fraser mentioned that in the movie. He mentioned that information gets trapped with the energy. And this energy is resonating at a specific frequency. It's in your brain, we can see it, I'll show you pictures, and it's in the organs as well. It shows up simultaneously at the same time. Wow! Are your boots shaking yet? Because, you see, if energy is trapped like this and it's a shock and an emotion, it's creating a wave outside the whole of your body field. We now know that through the Heart Math Institute that the information is being imprinted via the heart out into the field and also into the body as well, simultaneously. And the problem is, with disease is the information cannot get out. It's trapped inside this energy ball, which answers many, many questions. So let's look at some brain CTs. We have here how we use brain CTs. We don't really like them very much because they give you a heck of a lot of X-ray radiation, but this is where the major theory has come from. Can I also say that you don't need a brain CT if you have a disease in order to find out whether a disease is there or not. We can usually work back from the disease to where it would be in the brain and the location. I just need to let you know that. But we do use brain CTs for people that are terminally ill just to check whether they have resolved their conflicts or not. Just to let you know that in advance. In advance. Oh, I just have to turn here and not here and then I'm fine. There we are. I think it's because the receiver's up there. So we have a particular set of slicing that we use in brain CTs. And this is Lucille, who's actually sitting down here. She looks a lot prettier in real life than she is on the brain CT here. But this is what a brain CT looks like for those of you who are not aware of what one is. It's like a big donut that you put your head into and you get zapped with loads of radio waves. And from this, it works out a slicing of your brain. And we have, as I said, 4 areas that we're interested in metamedicine that relate to specific areas within the body. And these show up the trapped emotion. And why do they show up the trapped emotion? Why doesn't it show up in an MRI scan? Is because, and this came from Peter Fraser, by the way, he said, emotions resonate at the same frequency as X-rays. That's why we can see them under brain CT scan. I went, wow, thanks, Peter. We were in Spain at the time drinking sangria. And he just suddenly popped out with this. So X-rays resonate at the same frequency as emotions. And energy gets trapped in a specific location relative to the conflict shock that we're receiving. I'll give you a basic understanding of metamedicine. There are 4 areas that we're interested in the brain. There are 3 embryological layers, but let's just talk about 4 areas of the brain. There's the brainstem. The brainstem is responsible for your guts. It's also responsible for the liver and the lungs. And anything that goes through those particular areas are to do with digestion. Makes sense, doesn't it? Whether you can digest something or not. The brainstem area is apparently 500 years old, and it's very, very basic and very simple. And it responds in a very basic and simple way to life and death situations. And therefore, if you suddenly hear something or see something that completely affects you, that you can't digest, it then gets stuck in your gut. That's a brainstem issue. Of course, it could get stuck in your liver or your lungs. Like a fear of death conflict, or a fear of starvation conflict, or a fear of isolation conflict where it affects the kidneys. We talked about that yesterday. We talked about on the movie about one of the biggest problems, I believe, that most people experience is isolation and abandonment. Who said that? Was that Lynn yesterday? I think it was. Yeah. And we know this particular area is in the kidney collecting tubules, which regulates the water throughout the body. Quite interesting. The middle germ layer, the cerebellum, is responsible for your thick layer of skin around your body. If you want to find out what it feels like, you have 2 layers of skin, basically. If you just pinch an area of your skin like this and then just move your fingers up, you can feel the top layer and then the bottom layer underneath. The bottom layer is the dermis layer. It's one of the biggest organs in the body, the skin is. And it's responsible for protection. And so are also the pericardium, the peritoneum. So all of these are the big, thick, leathery skins around your intestines, around your heart, around your lungs. And also inside here, the breast glands as well. So we can see cancers in the breast show up here as well. Then we have the cerebral medulla. These are all the Latin names that are relative to the brain and embryology as well. And this is responsible for your core, your muscles, your bones, your tendons, your cartilage, that whole system, your core of who you are. That's where it showed up inside my brain in that particular area for my back. And then the cortex. The cortex makes us human. This is the bit that is the difference between human beings and many other animals. And the cortex is the bit we're very interested in, because from the cortex we can determine many of the psychological disorders that go on, from anxiety to mania to depression to bulimia to anorexia. It's all inside the cortex. Absolutely amazing. Over 75% of all cancers start inside the cortex. Interesting as well. So it's a quick resume of metamedicine. But based on the conflict content, the trapped energy information lodges in the brain and the body at the same time, specific to one of the 4 embryonic layers. As I said to you earlier, why does a disease show up in one particular place and not another? Why doesn't it show up in the whole body? This is the reason why. The shock is relevant to the part of the body which is going to be used in order to solve the problem. I'll say it again, the shock. In fact, can I remember what I just said? I thought that was quite profound. Did anybody write it down? It's being videoed. I can't remember it, sorry. Okay, so let's look at some of these brain layer areas. And I'm going to show you some brain CTs of people that we've had in the Metamedicine Association and clients and alike, that we've had permission to use their issues or talk about or show their brain CTs. Here's one. Anybody here suffer from irritable bowel syndrome? Yeah, quite a few people. Some people won't admit it because it causes wind and other stuff like that. But irritable bowel syndrome. I had it. I couldn't eat bread, drink milk, or any of those types of things. I'd had it for years and years and years. Found out what it was and solved it. But here we have a ring, which I don't know whether it is possible to dim the lights, is it? We might be able to see that. Let's see if we can actually dim the lights, and maybe I can show you some of these rings, particularly at the front. Paul's going to have a go. Whoa, look at that. Now there is a ring here that corresponds directly to the upper small intestine here, there, in the brainstem. Actually, what's really interesting is, look at this. All these rings show up in a specific way, almost in alignment with how the gut is made. The prostate and the uterus is here as well, by the way. And here is a ring showing up in the brain. It is a ring, it's two-dimensional, but actually in real life, it's a three-dimensional sphere that moves and resonates inside the body, in the brain. Not in the body, but it's in the body. And this is a small intestine problem, symptoms like irritable bowel syndrome, continuously repeating itself. It's a chronic process. And I've drawn another circle around it because the black circle is not the ring, by the way. The ring is inside here. I've got some other ones, you'll be able to see those. Okay. Here is a problem with a guy called Rob. He's not the problem was the issue that he had. Rob had nephrotic syndrome. Nephrotic syndrome is where there's excessive water retention. The kidney collecting tubules are responsible for that. Rob's problem was at age 2, his parents lost him in Edinburgh. He was found 4 hours later in a shopping centre screaming his head off, totally red. From that day onwards, he had horrendous problems. His testicles became so large they were the size of small rugby balls. He experienced water around here, which is all about a profound loss conflict from your parents, isolated and feeling abandoned. It mysteriously disappeared at age 18. He doesn't have the problem anymore. He used to blow up like a balloon. But you can see he's totally normal. He's one of the mental health coaches. So, many rings in here. In fact, what happened was I was reading his brain CT as I was learning to read them. And I looked at his one day and I phoned him up and I said, did you have about 12 to 14 relapses of nephrotic syndrome? And he said, thought for a while, he said, yeah, about that number. How did you know? It's up on your brain CT. It shows up. In fact, your whole history of all the illnesses you've been through are in your brain. They would be. Because the brain has got a memory, obviously, of what's gone on in the past. And you could probably just about make them out. Here's one, here's another, small ring, small ring, small ring. They've all calcified, so they've all done their job. The process has been completed. There's about 14 of them. I said 12. 12 to 14. Okay. Now, I'm sure many women here are interested in breast cancer because breast cancer kills more women through various interventions than any other type of cancer, apart from, I think, any other type of cancer, I think, definitely. Heart disease, maybe higher. And also, I think there's one other. Did you know that more people die from interventions from medical practitioners than, I believe, anything else? Oops. So we're looking at the mammary gland here. And this is the glands. This accounts for about 25% of all cancers in the breast. But your medical profession will say you have a breast cancer. They'll tell you what type. It'll be glandular or ductal, but they don't differentiate between the different layers. And they show up in the brain. Can you see this one? It's very elegant, very precise. This was a breast gland left chronic. The ring shows a worry chronic with the sun. She actually had a breast cancer, this lady. I've got a very unpleasant picture coming up. So if you don't like looking at disease or you don't like looking at breasts, then you can look away. But here is an actual lady with a breast gland issue, and this is actually broken through the skin as well, so it's in the dermis. And this is her glandular breast cancer, directly linking in with the organ and the brain simultaneously at the same time. Read by Dr. Anton Bader. Another one here is verrucas. This, unfortunately, this is a very super lad who I never met, but I knew his mum, or I still know his mum. And lovely story, but the end of the story isn't that brilliant. He had a brain tumor here. We took the brain CT over to Germany, myself, Dr. Crazy Alan Odom, and Dr. Bader. And we read the brain CT, and because the mum didn't know what the problem was that caused the brain tumor in the first place. And we worked out it was to do with verrucas, which are warts. And we said specifically on his foot. And what happened, we found out the conflict shock was when he was at school and he was trying to, he was just playing, and he was putting his head into a foot, not his head, a foot into a hole with a couple of other friends, and he made this hole a bit bigger. He was caught, taken to the headmaster, and the headmaster accused him of being a liar. And in order to protect his identity, he produced a whole bunch of warts on the bottom of his feet. He was operated on. He had quite a few years without any symptoms, but recently he had the symptoms again, was taken into hospital, operated on, given radiotherapy and chemotherapy, and didn't survive. Sorry, but it wasn't our fault. You understand, it was a lot of the medical interventions. Right, here is the medulla. This is where my problem was, but here we have a very interesting brain tumor, really, of a lady who had a massive resolution of osteoporosis due to a business partner taking money from the company, legally but immorally. It affected her at a deep, deep level. So you can actually see that, sorry. Here's another one. This is probably of interest to Ariel because this is the particular area of the brain that is responsible for the ovaries. And ovaries causing excessive issues with period pain. The lady could not conceive, which is quite interesting. We solved the conflict and she could conceive. Fascinating. Didn't show up as a brain tumor though. The cortex, very interesting part of the body. But here is the common cold. Affects the bronchial mucosa. Shows up in the brain. What about diabetes? Here's my friend Tim with type 1 diabetes. Woke up one day, late onset diabetes. Fantastic. And here is the ring, right in the right place to do with where the beta and the alpha islet cells are. Crazy, isn't it? Let me just ask you a question. Is this stunning or not? Because some people might be going no, and other people might be saying, wow. I think it answers a lot of questions. It did certainly for me. So here it is, again, the area pointed out. Here's a good friend of mine called Birgitte. I think I pronounced her name correctly. You would know better, Rob, being from Birgitte. Is that about right? Anyway, it's almost right. And I talk about her in my book. I talk about most of these people in my book. But she came to see me. When I first met her, it was in Norway, and she literally didn't do anything apart from sleep. She had no energy. She had been to see numerous people. She had her own therapy practice in Bergen in Norway, but she just had a horrible problem with just no ability to be able to stay awake. She would just fall asleep in front of her son while she was feeding him, like this. And he would sort of tap her, "Mum, Mum, Mum," and wake up. When I met her, she was practically half asleep the whole time. And she came to see me and on an NLP practitioner, and she happened to have a brain CT there. And I read it, and I said, "Have you ever had a thyroid problem?" She said, "No, nothing in my blood or anything else like that." I said, "You have a thyroid problem. It's showing up clear as day in this particular part of your body. It's a powerlessness conflict, as you can read here. When did you start to feel tired?" And she told me the story, which is in the book, about how she had an abortion and without any anesthetics at the time. And forgive me for this is a bit horrible, but the noise of what was going on made her, she was totally powerless. She couldn't do anything about it, and this caused the shock. And that's basically what happened to her. Now, we solved the conflict shock, and the next day, in fact that night, her energy completely came back. Amazing stuff. We've had lots of things like this. Going the wrong way here. Lucille again, and Lucille had anxiety problems. A lot of anxiety problems. I didn't realize. I phoned up Lucille. I had a brain CT in front of me. I was learning to read brain CTs, as I said. And I phoned up Lucille, and I said, "Do you have anxiety?" And she went, "Yeah, big time." I said, "Oh." And we did some work, and she's done a lot of other work. but many conflicts in the top of the brain. This combination of conflicts causes anxiety. And this is what's also very interesting, which I'd like to show you some stuff around that. How are we doing for time? 15 more minutes. Okay. Because there is a balance in the brain. A balance in the brain that is, we've noted that part of the brain, if you get a shock on one side of the brain and a combination of shocks on either side of the brain in a specific way, it causes the psychological diseases that occur. And these psychological diseases we can now look at and are able to give a process to them. In the CD set, and I may actually show it on Monday when I do my workshop, I actually have a clip of me working with a lady who is bipolar. And we get rid of the bipolar. The whole clip lasts 50 minutes, and that's how long it took from diagnosis to clearing it. We are finally coming up with the answers as to what causes disease to occur, the process that it occurs. And although you're going to find it very difficult to see these, but there are shocks here. And this is a lady called Sally, and she has active conflicts, and this is why people can become manic depressive. And this particular lady was, and I actually have other clips of me actually working with her, triggering off the active conflicts, turning her from a depressive person where she can't even get out of the chair to moments later to her literally jumping up to want to deal with whatever it is, and then I put her back into depression and she feels suicidal again, and then I make her jump up and down again, and then I make her feel normal. All within the space of about 10 minutes. That's amazing. There is a process to a disease, and I want to just cover this. I'll go into more detail on Monday. But there is a process to a disease, and the disease we know starts with a conflict shock. And when we go through the conflict shock, we show up with a stress. And that particular stress shows up here. It shows up here. And then what kicks in is the sympathetic nervous system. Often we don't feel ill. We feel like we've got lots of energy. We feel quite, we obsess a lot. We have changes in our body. We actually can see the wave change inside the aura during stress. We've seen that. We can also see that the person changes as well, as we talked about earlier, but the body is going through a sympathetic nervous system reaction, which the medical profession acknowledge, by the way. What they haven't done is the next bit, is when we resolve the conflict is when we get ill. And when we get ill, we feel fatigued and tired, and our appetite returns. We get weight gain, warm body and extremities, low blood pressure, our heart rate changes, we get a fever. And the medical profession acknowledge there is a system called the parasympathetic nervous system. What they haven't done is join the two together. Whoosh! Did you know that there are 400 cold diseases and 400 warm diseases? That each organ goes through a cold phase and a warm phase. Oops. Do you think there might be a process to a disease then? I think so. We certainly find this because from this model, and it gets a little bit more complex, we can determine where or what are the symptoms that a client is going to go through. What is the process that they're going to go through? How come the disease hasn't completed that process? Which, when you complete the process, the disease will lift and disappear. There's a fact. A cell cannot be in a stress state and repairing itself at the same time. From Bruce Lipton. Funny that, isn't it? So it can't be stressed and in a regeneration phase at the same time. So there's your facts. But there's more theory behind it, but basically that's one of the major ones. What causes chronic diseases, though? Things like eczema, irritable bowel syndrome, or even a reoccurring cancer, is after a shock, this particular point too, Everything during that time gets stored, and the slightest reminder can trigger the whole event off again and again and again and again. I had a lady with eczema. She came to see me, and she was actually doing some training. And she sat in front of the audience, and she had an eczema on here. I'll go back to the 2 phases. And I found out what the root cause of the problem was, and it was to do with her father. It was a separation from her father. She lived in New Zealand, and she felt separated from her father, always as if she'd failed her father. And I triggered off the stress phase of the disease. And during that time, she got cold. She said, as someone changed the heating in the room, it's the middle of summer, she was freezing. And then after that, I triggered off the second parasympathetic phase by saying something in her father's voice that made her reattach. Eczema is all about separation, by the way, from someone. Reattached to her father, and she suddenly went, have you really not changed the heating? And she took her jumper off, and she became incredibly hot. I did this several times in the audience. You were there, Rob, weren't you? Yeah. Disease definitely has a process. But in her case, and why I talk about eczema, is because eczema is a chronic disease process that keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. That night she phoned her father up, and she came back in the next day with more eczema on her right arm. And she said, I now believe this stuff because it's showing up directly after I have talked to my father. And now I can link every single time I speak to my father to the eruptions of my eczema. That's phenomenal. So, irritable bowel syndrome, I think actually, is a chronic process, repeated issue where a person cannot digest something that they heard or saw. What about a back pain that keeps coming back? Is a chronic process, repeated issue where a person devalues themselves consistently. They don't feel worthy. And it keeps getting repeated. They go home and their partner turns around to them and says, oh, I don't like you, or they say something horrible to them, or they just give them the look. Can just cause these things to occur. Or psoriasis, chronic process, repeated issue where a person feels separated from people. That's eczema. Psoriasis is several eczema processes going on simultaneously over and over and over again. Hence you get the white flaky skin followed by the oozing dark red skin. And that's when it itches, when it goes into resolution. We can explain why these things are there now. And the beauty of it is knowing that why it's there, we can now work out how to solve it. That's profound. I think there was a question yesterday that said, well, how do you solve these diseases? And people came up with various solutions. I think we've got a process to it now. Like, this is not a therapy, by the way. But we now know why these diseases are there. And I'm going to show you a clip from a lady in a moment that I think will astound you. But basically, how we resolve issues is we need to deal with the stressful event to start with. And the therapy is directed to go right into the center of the issue of that resonating ring, not only in the brain, but it's in the organ at the same time. And we release the trapped information by exploding the issue from the inside out. That's how we do it. And what we've been doing is, I've been working with Harry Massey and Peter Fraser to develop infoceuticals, which I like to call them homeopathy on steroids. That's my way of putting it. I know some people in NES would say otherwise, but it's just, they're so amazingly targeted. And we've been able to develop brain infoceuticals that can actually go directly into the core of these issues and blow them from the inside out. When people take them, they get warm and hot. Remember, Eric Pohl was talking about it? Their heat increases by some 300%, which is not real. But we do them. We've used these infoceuticals, and we start to get the person right inside the event, and it goes, I've experienced it. It's bizarre. And we're developing a way of being able to do this using metamedicine with very little background information to be able to just direct these issues right into the center of these cores by asking targeted questions, using a bit of NLP, using metamedicine, using NES imprinted water to solve conflicts at a very, very deep level. We're still experimenting. I think they're going to be out soon. But very, very exciting stuff. There's also Your Field is Fixed. Has anybody ever come across Human Design System? We've been working with this in the Metamedicine Association recently. And we found out that, and I put this up, that the field that you have is fixed in some ways. In other ways, it's not. And I just wanted to share with you that there is a direct link to disease within certain fields, that certain fields will experience disease, and other people will not experience disease. Fascinating again. It's linked to our genetic imprint, but the genes, as you and I now know, and Lynn was telling us only earlier, was that you have to have the environment to trigger them. Where we have white points, we are conditioned by others in the environment. So where there is a white square here, you have conditioning. Lines relate to gates that determine our personality and unconscious design. So if you've got a red line in a particular place, it's unconscious, you're not aware of it. And we've been working with this stuff and having just profound results as well. And I'm going to be talking to Peter about this because I think he needs to know more about it. But it's more proof that the field is there and we are getting very close to determining what might be preventative medicine so that you know that if you're in a particular situation and you have a shock, it could affect you. That would be amazing. So then you can phone up your metamedicine licensed health coach or whoever you want to solve the problem with and just go, hey, I've just had a shock and I need to solve it now. Not tomorrow, now. And you can do the work and resolve it and then you don't have the disease. It's an idea. But you think that that is stupid? Let me tell you about the head of the International Metamedicine Association, a wonderful, wonderful friend of mine and a colleague, Johannes Fischlinger. I was listening to him talk on Thursday. We had a metamedicine trainers meeting, and he said he went to an integrative medicine conference. And President Barack Obama, his initiative is not any longer to just treat disease when it's in the chronic stage. But his whole directive now is preventative medicine. And more importantly, an integrative approach of traditional, alternative, complementary. They don't know about energetic medicine yet. And Johannes, who was actually there under the guise of the yoga month, which he is involved in, suddenly went to all these people and said, hey, have you heard of metamedicine? Let me tell you a little bit more about it. And these people were going, wow, you mean to say stuff shows up in the brain, it shows up in the body, and you can design a therapy based on that because you know the cause of the disease and why certain symptoms are there? No way. Because they've got lovely techniques where people sit down and relax, which works to a degree, but why? We can answer these questions now. So, what are we going to do on the workshop on Monday? Is we're going to look in more detail as to why a person becomes sick, discover the process of how a disease progresses, go into depth how these issues occur in a bit more detail, discuss how to heal yourself using the mind, the body, the spirit, the social and the environmental connection. You see, it is about the mind and the body and the environment and how we interact in it. That's what changes or switches on and off the genes. But there is a code. There is a matrix. We live in a matrix. And some people will be more susceptible than others. I hope to have some demonstrations. We'll see. May run out of time, but it would be lovely to do a couple of demonstrations and just show you how we can get right to the core of a problem very, very quickly at lightning speed. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And I've been studying different types of therapeutic interventions for many years. And it's a chance for you to work on an issue of your own. And what else do you need? What else do you do? Please, buy the book. This is revolutionary stuff. It's taken me 16 years when I first came across this stuff to find literature in English about it. I had to write it. It's there now. It's available. If you want to learn more, EFT and metamedicine with me and the creator of Matrix Reimprinting. These are available as well. There are 9 DVDs. I've had feedback from people who just say, this is just unbelievable. But we actually take someone from depression to mania, as I said, clear backache, clear all sorts of things on there. We also have home study packs as well, with DVDs and audio. Just a 2-day introduction. You can learn if you just want to get the basics. We also have trainings as well happening, not this weekend, well, next weekend. So there's some leaflets, if you please take those. And also the models. If you want to actually become licensed as a mental health coach, and we need people. I train this stuff worldwide, and I get phone calls from around the world asking me to help them. I can't do it. I refer them to my other people. They're getting inundated. We need licensed mental health coaches. If you want to work with cancer or terminal illnesses, this stuff works beautifully with your present systems. They don't conflict at all. Whatever you do, whether it's NES, EFT, psychological interventions, whether you do Reiki, whatever you do, metamedicine fits. More information on my website. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it.